Now that you have a general idea of what I do as a forensic entomologist, given that last case study, let's get into the scope of forensic entomology. So, we're going to be using these terms over and over and over again throughout the semester, so now's the time to define them. So when I say forensic, and those of you who have taken your criminal justice courses or your other forensic courses, you know this. But forensic simply means pertaining to, connected with, or used in the courts of law. So this has to do with anything having to do with law. This is why if you went to high school and they didn't have, say, a forensic science program, when people said forensics, they meant the argument or the debate club, right? So forensics really is an argument. It is simply using anything having to do with court of law to argue for one side or the other. So when we talk about forensic science, we're using science in a court of law. We're using science for our argument. So as you well know, or I hope you do by now, any science can be a forensic science, including entomology. So entomology is a science. It is the branch of zoology. So it's a subset of learning about animals that deals with insects and closely related arthropods. So a little while later, I'll get into all of the analysis, say, of the insects and whatnot. But entomology is simply the study of bugs, the study of insects and things that are closely related. So, quick aside, as you get to know entomology a little bit more, as you get to know me and other entomologists, you'll find that while we specifically study insects and specifically certain types of insects, people who don't know any better are really just going to send us questions about anything that has anything more than, say, 4 legs. So anything other than dog or cat or whatever, they're going to call an entomologist. So any of the creepy crawlers out there, entomology gets called in. So once you start taking a few more entomology courses, and if you decide to take more than just this one, you will become that entomology person in your life. Trust me. And you'll get people who are just sending you weird, fuzzy photos of bugs from across the room, or spiders, or ticks, or mites, or centipedes, or millipedes, or crabs in some cases, or crawfish, whatever. And they'll ask you what it is. So you can sort of think of entomology as anything with more than 4 legs. But really, specifically, and this is the question I'm going to be asking you on your quiz, entomology, branch of zoology that deals specifically with insects. So when we talk about forensic entomology then, this is the interaction between this zoology dealing with insects or arthropod science and the judicial system. Anytime we use insects in a court of law, or at a crime scene, or in a case, or there's a lawsuit, or whatever, then we have forensic entomology. Now, because forensic entomology is such a broad thing, then, we end up breaking it up into 3 major sections. So this makes it a little bit easier for those of us who are forensic entomologists to specialize in particular areas. Entomology is huge. It's ginormous. There are so many bugs out there. There's so many insects out there, so many closely related arthropods, that when you start focusing on particular aspects of entomology, you don't have the time to study everything. You just can't. So when you talk about a forensic entomologist, then we tend to specialize in one of these areas. It just makes it a little bit easier for us to, say, take 12 years of our life and go to school and get our PhD and really focus on certain aspects of entomology. So the 3 major areas of forensic entomology are broken up by the insect type and really the type of lawsuits or the type of crimes that are associated with these bugs. The first is urban entomology. It has to do with insects in the human environment. The second is stored product entomology. So those are insects found in food. And the third is medico-criminal entomology. This is insects at a crime scene, usually involving death. Today, we are just going to be looking at urban entomology. And I've broken this up into a few sections based on the different types of insects. So again, urban entomology has to do with insects in the human environment. So this can be anything from insects found in your home, insects found in restaurants, insects found in hotel rooms, anywhere where you are at and there are bugs, and for some reason you end up going to court over it. That's when you get urban forensic entomology. This also includes things like rural entomology. So these are insects found on rural lands. Myiasis. Myiasis is the infestation of a living organism with fly maggots. So this is what happens when you get an injury and there are maggots in that wound. We see this a lot in animals. So when I do animal cases, and I'll give you a case study of this at some point, where an animal has a wound, it gets infested with blowfly maggots, I get to figure out how long those maggots have been there. Finally, mortuary neglect. This has to do with improper embalming of dead bodies. So let's start with the pests in the human environment. This is by far the most common aspect of the most common aspect of urban entomology when it comes to forensics. As you probably know, or as you may have the problems with yourself, people don't like it when bugs are in their house or in their hotel room or in their restaurants or whatever. So an urban entomologist, an urban forensic entomologist, deals with insects in that human environment. The most common insects that get brought up in court are these 5. We've got roaches, termites, fleas, bed bugs, and nuisance flies. So think about these things. When was the last time you saw, say, a cockroach in your house? And how happy were you about that? Now, having a cockroach in your house, really not a big deal, especially those of us who live in the South. I mean, they're everywhere and they're really good at what they do. So they're going to be getting into your homes. They're going to be getting into places, but people don't like it as a general rule. So that's when we start to see people freaking out. Now, if it's in your house, you can't really sue yourself, but if you're in a hotel room and there's cockroaches, or you're in a restaurant and there's cockroaches, that's when lawsuits happen. So let's take a moment and look at the cockroaches. These are the ones that are most common in the US and the ones that you are more than likely going to run into. There are currently 3,500 different species of cockroaches out there. This is usually when I get a shudder from people who are first learning about cockroaches. But what's interesting is most of the cockroaches in the world are actually outdoor cockroaches that don't bother people at all. 55 of these cockroach species occur in the United States. Now, these 5 species, these 5 photos that you see here, these are the most common cockroaches that are associated with humans in some way. Now, again, most cockroaches live outdoors, but these 5 have evolved to exploit human habitations. They've evolved to exploit our homes, our hotels, our restaurants, those sorts of places. Now, they will prosper in filth, and they can infest even the most sanitary of buildings. This, again, is why I tell people, even if you have cockroaches in your home, it is not embarrassing. This isn't a thing that is that big a deal. It's when they become a real problem and they've just taken over everything that they can become an issue. But they can get everywhere. They have had millions of years of evolution in order to figure out how to do exactly that. So if you find 1 or 2 in your home, not that big a deal. Even 1 or 2 in a restaurant or in a hotel room, not that big a deal. It matters more how the proprietors take care of it. Really. Now, most cockroaches are nocturnal. This is why they appear at night. And when you turn on the light, say you're walking into your kitchen, you turn on that light and they all sort of run. They're disturbed by that light. They feed on a variety of plant and animal products. So they can feed on everything from meat to grease to starch, sweets. They will eat leather. They'll eat wallpaper paste or book bindings, pretty much everything. They become a real problem when they start contaminating foodstuffs. And they will do that with their excrement. They will do that with their salivary secretions. They'll do that with their exoskeletons. So when we talk about reproduction of insects, I'll talk about how they shed their exoskeletons. And that can become an issue. Now, they do carry some disease organisms, some bacteria especially, on their exoskeletons, although they don't have a really great ability of vectoring those diseases. So we know they carry things on their exoskeleton like E. coli. But actually spreading that to humans, there is very little documentation that shows they actually can. So really, they're not horrible insects. I spent a lot of time telling people that cockroaches are really just sweet. In fact, they think we're super dirty. So if you go and touch a cockroach, it will go and clean itself for like 30 minutes. So because of all the bacteria we have on our skin, they think we're gross. Awesome. So if and when you go into Urban Entomology, these are the 5 species of cockroaches that you will run into. The first is Blatella germanica. This is the German cockroach. This is one of the more prevalent cockroaches in the southern region of the US, although it can be found just about everywhere. It is a light brown cockroach, about 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch long. And it has these 2 dark lengthwise stripes on its head shield, or on that prothoracic region. So you can see those here. See those little head stripes? Yep. That is one of the major indicative characteristics of Blatella germanica. Now, the adults are winged, but they very rarely fly. The young, or the nymphs, are much smaller, they're darker, and they're wingless. These species produce a lot of eggs, and they have a developmental time of about 2 months. So a single female can produce upwards of 35,000 offspring over her lifetime. This is why they become such a problem. Most often, these species are found in homes, in apartments, in condos, and in commercial food establishments. Usually, they're going to enter in bottled drink containers, in big packages of potatoes, in big packages of onions, or dried pet foods. They like getting into grocery sacks, into corrugated cardboard, into flat pack furniture, those sorts of things. So anywhere that they can hide, I mean, they're really small, and get into your home or into your restaurant or whatever, that's how they get in. Now, once they get into your house, they're going to seek shelter near moisture and near food. So you most commonly find them in kitchens and in bathrooms, especially under the sink. When their populations get very, very large, they are going to move into less associated areas. So areas that aren't associated with water or food as much. So you'll start to see them in living rooms and bedrooms. That's when you know you have an issue. You start seeing this species in your bedroom and you don't keep food or water in there. That's when you know you have a very, very large colony of these cockroaches in your house. The next species is the brown-banded cockroach, or Supella longipalpa. So these individuals are a light gold or a glossy dark brown. They're about the same size as the German cockroach, 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch long. The difference is they have these transverse yellow bands across their wings and on their abdomen. You can see those right there. You see these transverse yellow bands? They don't have those same head shield stripes that the last species had. Instead, they've got these bands on their wings. Major difference between the two, easiest way to tell. Now, these are very, very active cockroaches. They will fly or jump when they are disturbed. Now, they will glue their egg capsules in protected areas. They like gluing it on the back of furniture, in closets, on the back of televisions, nice and warm back there. And that's how they tend to get into homes. Their life cycle lasts between 5 to 12 months, and they are more apt to be found in homes, apartments, hotels, and motels rather than in restaurants. They prefer starchy foods when they feed, and they have a much lower water requirement than the German cockroach. So they tend to be found in dimly lit areas, in drier areas of your home. So places like your living room, your bedroom, those sorts of places where you're going to tend to find these rather than under the sink in your kitchen or in your bathroom. Because of their love of these drier areas, they are much harder to control than the German cockroach because they tend to spread out all over your house. The next species is the American cockroach. This is Paraplanta americana. This is one of the largest common species in North America. It is 1.5 to 2 inches long, so it is huge compared to the last two species. They have these very, very well-developed wings, but they very seldom fly. Instead, they will glide, especially if they are on countertops or on high areas in your house. You disturb them, they're going to glide downwards. The adults will form an egg capsule, and they will drop that egg capsule near food or near water where it can be covered with debris. So you'll find them underneath things around your sink. So underneath sponges, underneath watered up towels, whatever like that. Now their life cycle, they live about 10 to 35 months. And in areas where it's nice and warm, so in the southern regions, they tend to live outdoors. They like being underneath the house. They like being in sheltered areas outside. When it gets colder, though, that's when they move inside, and they really like living in the moist areas of the kitchen. The oriental cockroach is the species Blatellia orientalis. These are another large species of cockroach, about 1 to 1.25 inches long, and they are a glossy dark brown to black. They do have well-developed wings, as you can see here, but they do not fly. They're also very sluggish when it comes to cockroaches. So they don't scuttle very quickly. They tend to move pretty slowly. You can catch them really easily if you felt you needed to. And they have a seasonal development. So they will overwinter as adults, they will mate in the spring, and then they will move outdoors during the summer when it's nice and warm. So if you go around, say, your college campus, you tend to see these in stairwells during the warm parts of the year, that you tend to see them outside. As it starts to get a little colder during the fall and the winter, that's when they're going to move indoors. And you can see them there. Now, when we look for them outside, we tend to find them near decaying organic matter. So in lawns, in compost piles, those sorts of places. Indoors, they're a lot like the American cockroach, where they're found in moist areas, but they're a little strange. They tend to stick to ground level and below. So if you have a second-story kitchen, or you have your bathrooms upstairs or whatever, they don't tend to go up there like we see some of these other cockroaches. Instead, they'll stay on the ground floor and they'll stay below. That's because they like going outside and coming back in all of the time. The females do not produce a lot of offspring, so unlike the German cockroach, which can produce up to 35,000, the females of the oriental cockroach produce just under 200 offspring in her lifetime. So we don't see nearly as much of a infestation of this type of cockroach as we do the other types. Finally, the smoky brown cockroach is Paraplanta fulginosa. So this is, again, a larger cockroach. It's about 1 inch long. It's dark brown to black. And they are honestly kind of boring. But we do tend to see them come indoors a little bit. They primarily live outdoors. They live in the woods. They live in leaf litter. They live in trash piles. They do have seasonal migrations, however. And it's during these seasonal migrations when they'll come inside. So they will try to move from one place to another. And if your house or your restaurant or your apartment, whatever happens to be in the way, they're going to go right on through. So what's nice about these cockroaches, if you see them come in, just open up your back door. They'll walk right out the back and they'll be fine. But people do tend to freak out when they see them. They're not that big a deal. They are mostly outdoor cockroaches. All right, so we're going to end this portion here. Let me know if you have any questions.